Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Elise Johnson. I am an independent filmmaker based in Chicago, and I'm also the publisher of the TRiiBE, which is a digital publication and production company that is dedicated to reshaping the narrative of Black Chicago. I'm also a part of the Quinn family. I started my documentary career as an intern at Quinn some years ago. I've worked directly with Gordon, and I've also worked in documentary film at 371 Productions based in Milwaukee. And my latest film, Unapologetic, just had its theatrical run, and it'll be premiering, having a national broadcast in December for PBS's POV program. So thank you so much for joining us today. And now I just want our panelists to introduce themselves. And let's start with you, Gordon.
I'm Gordon Quinn. I'm the founder and artistic director of Quinn. And, you know, I've made films over the years, but really what I spend my time with now is working with younger filmmakers and emerging filmmakers.
Go ahead, Ms. Caples.
Oh, I'm Margaret Cables, Executive Director of the Community Film Workshop of Chicago. We train people in film and digital media. Currently, our best programs where I partnered with Gordon is with Diverse Voices and Docs, and a program that we do at the University of Chicago called the Production Institute, a storytelling project where students produce documentaries.
All through the pandemic, Margaret's programs kept running, and I was able to participate, see some of them virtually, some of the work that the students were doing. Very impressive.
That's great. That's wonderful. And I want to talk about this moment that we're in. History is being made every day. We're living in a pandemic, and also a moment of racial reckoning in America. So documenting this time is incredibly important. I mentioned that I work in journalism. I'm a publisher. And in journalism, we say that journalists write the first draft of history. How do you believe that documentary film can serve as a corrective draft of history? Gordon, let's start with you.
Well, you know, I've always believed that storytelling has a role to play in a democracy. And documentary films range from, you know, agitprop and things that are done very quickly to be part of a struggle to, you know, major theatrical films, but they're all done with a certain kind of craft and a certain kind of artistic approach to storytelling. And I think storytelling is one of those things that can cross from you know, one community, one group of people to help them understand another group of people. I think the problem that we've been confronting for many years in documentary filmmaking, really from the beginning, is that question of who gets to tell the story. And particularly in documentary filmmaking, because it's so expensive, those people who have access to the resources to tell those stories has always been a fundamental problem. But I think art makes a difference, and art makes a difference in how a democracy moves forward.
Well, I think it's going to be a corrective draft if the people of color do their background and make an extreme effort to present the facts correctly. It's true that we have not always had the access to the tools to do this. However, it's very important that we do it correctly, that we represent the history of our communities and our country in the context of looking at history and how it has affected the people and their communities and their lives and the policies that were initiated by some of the erroneous perceptions of our community. So it's important for documentaries to be made by that particular group because they have, well, they've lived it. First of all, they have firsthand experiences. Their parents, the people that they are communicating with, have lived it. They bond together in doing this project, and I think it brings a different perspective. I know it does. It brings a better perspective of people, and help us to get rid of a lot of the stereotypes that we have about each other, because we have more in common than we do than we have don't have in common. And so it's really going to help a lot, because people, you know, expect for us, they put one group in a box, and they defined it by the stereotypes that they read in the newspaper, on television, and through other means, without having any real contact. So that's the other thing that documentaries do, is they give us exposure to people, and that exposure breaks down a lot of ideas, about preconceived ideas.
Gordon, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, Margaret touched on one thing that I think really resonates with kind of how diverse voices came into being, because we developed diverse voices together with the Community Film Workshop. And that sense of discipline, sort of Margaret was saying, doing it right, I think was also something that by working on it together, we were really able to, I'm not sure we would have been as focused on that in developing the curriculum and that kind of thing without the input from someone like Margaret and the Community Film Workshop, the whole organization, which had been teaching for many years, which had been in that space.
Yeah. Thank you.
And should I call you Margaret or Miss Caples?
No, you can call me Margaret.
Okay.
Normally, I don't allow someone your age to call me by my first
You know,
name.
that's why I had to check, you know, I'm not going to disrespect my elders or none of that. So I was raised right. All right. Margaret, so you've built a longstanding media education institution. And how is your institution supporting the liberation of marginalized communities?
We're doing what we've always done, keeping the doors open. Now, I'm adding some humor, but that's really real true for all organizations that are community-based or people of color. The one thing we have to do is be present. That means that we have to be open. Our doors have to be open so that people have a place, an institution to turn to. Secondly, we have to provide within our budget and our mission the tools for people to do the work. It's not everybody's mission to be documentary filmmakers. It may be just a screen or be youth-based, but we have to look at our mission and how we're going to help people. Now, in terms of the workshop, we've always supported people to do documentaries. We had a production company, Cinema Video Concepts, where students could work on documentaries and further their skills. And secondly, we provided an access program where you can use the equipment. All of our graduates used our equipment on their shoots. And so access to equipment, access to people, having a physical space, and then having people who serve as mentors is very important. So I think that's crucial for an organization that's going to support documentary filmmaking, much as Quinn has done over the years.
And Gordon, narratives are very important, and we've seen in recent American politics how easily Americans can latch on to distorted narratives, lives, and extremism. Since Quinn's mission is about supporting democracy and a more just society through documentary filmmaking, do you feel that Quinn films are making an impact in American democracy? And how is your institution taking steps to measure the impact of your films?
it, impact is a really important question. And I think our field struggles with that. We try to talk about how to measure it and that kind of thing. But we're also talking about works that are crafted, that are a work of art. And so, do you measure the impact of art? Somebody in a film I made years ago talking about a painting, and he says, I don't know. It just goes into you and it stays there, and it may be months or years later where it makes a difference. And so I think we have to be careful of like kind of quick and dirty solutions. Funders and foundations all like impact. I think the gatekeepers, from PBS to Netflix, are all concerned about the numbers. And yet sometimes I've seen films that take a long time to find their audience. They grow very slowly, and little by little, they get out there. One of our early Diverse Voices graduates, Kelly Pope, her film, All the Queen's Horses, about the largest municipal fraud in the US. And the woman just got out of jail. So the film is getting attention again. I mean, she should have gone to jail for 20 years. She's out in like 10. But that's a film that gradually found a bigger and bigger audience. And people really started to understand how much they could learn about how fraud happens on a municipal level and how they as citizens could do something to keep an eye out for it. And so I think, yeah, films make a difference, but it's not necessarily the numbers. The other thing that I think is really important, and it resonates with this question of who's telling the story and what the story is that streaming, when Netflix first went into business, they were providing DVDs to people. They were mail, and their business model was, if you want it, we have it. They wanted everything. Now with streaming, they really shifted their model to, you're going to want what we're pushing at you. And I think so much of the media has that quality today. And one of the things that I say to young filmmakers is, don't ask me what PBS wants. The question is, how are you going to make these gatekeepers want what needs to be the story that has to be told? How can you make them take what you think is important? And that's an ongoing struggle. I mean, Margaret and I have been involved in these struggles from, a long time ago in the battle for cable access TV, CAN TV here in Chicago, dating all the way back. We were on the first board of it. The battle for ITVS and, POV, and the different battles that we won with public television to be more open to both diverse voices and regional voices and people who aren't already on the staffs of public television companies. And so those battles now are going to have to be kind of waged in this private sector area. And it's a huge challenge because you have less leverage.
You mentioned a word that I care a lot about and I want to come back to, and that's gatekeepers. So I want to hold on to that for another question. But Margaret, do you have anything to add about impact? Because I don't know, to me, it seems like we can measure awards and like how many people showed up, to the premiere and those numbers and things like that. But like, what is missing from impact and how we talk about, the impact of these films, especially when a lot of times we're making films about Black and Brown communities. And then a lot of times those films are not reaching Black and Brown communities.
Well, I think that's a job both for the filmmakers and the organizations, because people, when Tyler Perry started out, they would call it the Chitlin Circuit. And so sometimes we may need to go back to basics and go to our base group and build that audience. And I think that's what we need to talk about more, is how we build that audience to care about the projects and to support the projects and the filmmakers. That's really what the source of it is. We did a film festival for 3 years, Minorities in Film. self-portraits, minorities in films. And it was difficult to build that audience because we were doing it in communities. And so, you know, as opposed to people who go to big venues and have film festivals. So we really do have to work at building that audience. But other than that, the impact is huge because when we show the films on Zoom, we have so many comments because people identify with the content. And so it has affected people enough for them to get involved. And so we have to, it impacts the filmmaker to encourage them to make more films. And it builds a community. So we're doing things simultaneously. We're helping young filmmakers. We're building a community of filmmakers, you know, and we're also trying to build that base people who will support the films. And it's more important to me that the people in the community support it, because one thing about our society is we've learned that the majority group is very interested in what we're doing, our culture, and so that they can emulate it. I won't say the other word, but they do see our creativity and be imitated. So I think the larger society benefits because of us. And we have, and that's the impact we have on society all over the world. It's not just in Chicago or nationally or locally, it's all over the world. People all over the world are interested in our culture. And they're interested in a different view of it because they've been given the same vision that's been, you know, on television for centuries. You know, it's nothing new. So, you know, the impact is just hard. I just know it impacts us. We're the people who make the films are great. They respect it, but they want to do more. And I just think that it's going to be we will have to find ways, our own platforms, really, to do this and have people come to us.
Yeah, it's always been a struggle, but I think we are, you know, if I think back, you know, our organization always was interested in taking films out into communities, into the world, working with unions, whoever the film was about, having these community screenings. But I do think that more and more now there's a whole field called, you know, outreach and engagement, and people who do that and they specialize in it. And I think I can't emphasize enough what Margaret said, you know, it's a responsibility of a filmmaker to help your film get to its audience. But I think the other thing that's really important is when you have a community screening and people are going to look at your movie, and maybe they're going to make a decision based on what they see in your movie. Maybe they're going to decide to go on strike. Maybe they're going to decide on who to vote for mayor. I actually, because of Unapologetic, your film, Morgan, I voted for I didn't vote for Lightfoot because of what I saw in your movie and what I saw about her in your movie, you know, and that you don't count those kind of actions the same as you do as an entertainment audience, which may be, you know, millions of people. It's like small groups of people seeing a film and making some kind of action out of that. That's incredibly important too.
It is.
So much has just come up and I have so many thoughts. One thing that you said, Margaret, about showing films on Zoom, which is something that's completely new for the documentary landscape right now, but it brought to the forefront a question about accessibility, because my film Unapologetic premiered at Black Star Film Festival during a pandemic where we didn't get to go to Philadelphia and stand on a stage and watch the film in theater. But at the same time, we got to premiere virtually, and people who would have never had access to go to the festival were able to watch the film with us virtually. So that says a lot too about even the distribution models of documentary films and how they're not initially accessible to even our own friends and family who were able to experience the premiere with us because it was virtual. But at the same time, the documentary field is at this moment of uncertainty because of the pandemic and theaters being closed and things like that. Margaret, what is the role of institutions in expanding access to the documentary field, the field of filmmaking?
Well, first of all organizations have to think about their mission. What is the mission of your organization? And what is the mission of the films that are being produced by your organization? So they have to be able to be in line with each other. You really have to do that. Secondly, our role, I really can't stress this enough. We can't help a filmmaker if we don't have money. We just can't do it. We can't help them because it takes staff. When you take on a new responsibility, you have to have staff. You can't, and so you have to have money to support it. It's just a fact of life. And you can't provide equipment, good working equipment for people and access for them to edit unless you have a facility to do those things. So that's one of the challenges of getting grants so that you can provide that access to filmmakers. But it's important that we play that role. And in fact, in looking at the piece that on who is JT and what is the Community Film Workshop, they talked about how accessible the workshop was, that people could just drop by and come by and talk with JT, and what that meant, the mentoring that was available by the staff, provided by the staff, and be able to have a place to get equipment. So it's important that we provide those things, but we do have to have financial support you have to have the infrastructure, you have to have people. You really do have to, and you just cannot stretch yourself too far. I limit what I do because I don't have the resources, but once I get the resources, I'll be able to do more. We are going to have a new initiative in 2020 where we are going to work with young social activists, and we're going to teach them storytelling and how to use a digital camera to do that. So that's one way, but it's a small way to be able to broaden the documentary field and broaden the skill base, because you have to have the skills. There have been a lot of documentaries produced and young people have their cameras, but okay, how do you use it as an effective tool? That takes an institution to teach you that. It takes an institution to teach you how to use it as a tool and how to have the ability to do the skills to do that, and then not to be intimidated about the technology.
Absolutely. Educational programming is so important. It's been important in my own career development. Like I mentioned, I came out of Quinn's internship program, which in many ways was possibly even more important than my film school education, working with professionals in the fields and being a part of projects that are in the works is so important for emerging filmmakers, and both of your programs do a great job at that. But I want to bring back that word, Gordon, gatekeepers. It's once you are an emerging filmmaker, it's difficult to get your film produced and seen without the stamp of approval from certain institutions, whether it's funders, industry fellowships, the festival circuit, distributors, like they're all, white-led institutions. And I'm wondering, is there work being done to kind of grapple with that power disparity that emerging filmmakers, and especially filmmakers of color, are dealing with having to go through these gatekeepers to get their works made?
I think there's a lot going on in our field right now, and a lot of people are looking at power relationships, and I'm really looking to the next generation of filmmakers. The thing I always say to filmmakers, if you want to be a documentary filmmaker, you have to take on media activism too. You have to be engaged in these battles with the gatekeepers. And that goes in both directions. It's the gatekeepers who, control what's going to be seen and control what gets into the mass media and what gets on television. But it's the gatekeepers that also control the money and where it goes and who it goes to. And that's, the foundations and that kind of thing. And so I think, it's that's just part of the territory of what we want young people to learn, which is that these battles are going to go on. I don't know, Margaret, how you see it. I mean, I've watched for, ever since we've known each other, I would say, 30, 35 years when I first knew you and Jim. And I mean, the reality is the Community Film Workshop never got its due, never got seen, noticed, and funded in the way that it should have been by the major institutions in Chicago, not even to mention nationally. I mean, we all suffer from the problem that we're really not seen so well by the national, organizations and institutions. I think Quinn had some breakthroughs in that, but those battles are tremendously important and they're strategic. So Margaret, you'll have to tell me, it was 20 years ago that you brought NAMAC to Chicago?
1992.
Yeah, and so the National Alliance of Media Arts Organizations, yeah. And that was a national organization for media arts organizations. Margaret was on the board of it, and she brought them to Chicago for their conference. And it was just this incredible thing where all of these other organizations were like, oh, now we understand that there's a media community in Chicago. Now that we, they actually got to see us because they were here.
I'd like to respond to that. And I forgot that was a role of the organization, but I was elected to the NAMAC board the same year we started advocating for ITVS. It was a very racially tense time because a lot of organizations of color were coming into NAMAC, and there was resistance even at NAMAC for Hispanic and Black and Asian organizations to be coming into this white film group alliance. So I was on the board for 2 terms plus 1 year. So we went through a lot of changes. But doing all of that change, we saw organizations that developed. We saw the development of a lot of more people of color making documentaries and advocating for their community. So there was a lot of change. The real difficulty also is having people tell you that your project is not worthy of being funded while they're funding the same projects by white men, basically. And so it's really a slap in the face. It's not because they didn't have the skills, it's because they didn't have the connections, or were viewed as not being able to be funded or to be distributed. So I think that idea is organizations are now finding that was not the correct decision. And now they're developing funds to provide more equity and looking at racial issues in terms of their funding and how they fund organizations of color now. So there are a lot of organizations, foundations that have gotten together to pool their money. And we were, one group here in Chicago is the Chicago Treasures. And I'm happy to say that I was a recipient of one of their grants, in which is the largest grant we've ever gotten, which is $140,000 over a 3-year period. And to help us kind of balance that disparity in having the source funds to move our project. We already had the program, so just be able to fund the program and be able to employ filmmakers. You know, that's the other thing that we do. We employ filmmakers, and we in our development, we have always done that at the workshop. We always had graduates who came back, who taught our classes, who led workshops, and who were mentors. And so we always believe in teaching and training. You know, we have that peer concept, peer trainer concept that has always been our model. We have a model for the way we teach and how we train the next level of filmmakers. One thing we found out is that when you train them, when they teach the class, they're really teaching themselves again. And then they realize how much they learned and how that's translated on the set when they go onto a movie set, when they have their own set in terms of understanding pre-production and all of that. And if you know what's right and you do what's right, your project's going to come out right. Well, it's going to have some hitches, but you know, it will be more than likely it will be successful. And I've forgotten the question. I'm starting to ramble. What was the question again?
It's okay. I think y'all tapped into what I was trying to get to there.
Okay, good.
But Margaret, I mean, well, Gordon, you had mentioned that that Margaret's work really has not gotten its due. And I've seen, you know, Quinn and you take on causes and be very successful, like with fair use campaigns. Like, do you feel like there is a role for more privileged institutions to uplift institutions like Margaret's moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't necessarily say uplift. I think what we can do is form alliances to call it. The organizations and the institutions like the Community Film Workshop have always been there in the community. And so what we have to do is play a role in kind of making sure that the gatekeepers in both directions see them and pay attention to them. Yeah, and so I absolutely think there is a role for, you know, organizations like Quinn to you know, form those kind of alliances and trying to get those funding and resources directly to the community, you know, organizations that have been doing it. You know, the truth is a program like TRiiBE was something that we came up with. I don't know, was it, I'm really bad on dates, as you see, but it was over 10.
I think it was 2013.
There you go. So
yeah, I was on the board. Yeah.
And we were concerned about the fact that Quinn was not working with a lot of people of color, where, you know, they weren't the projects that we were connecting with, and how could we change that reality? So, you know, we formed this partnership with the Community Film Workshop that I hope helped our organization and also helped the Community Film Workshop. But it was, you know, it was a synergy, a two-way street, because we really wanted to change who we were able to work with and who we, you know, who we could help support get their projects off the ground. You know, Unapologetic is a good example of something that, like, that's what we wanted to see happen. This is just an aside, and I don't know what you think about this, Margaret, but one of the things I was struck by when we first did it, the very first year, we got quite a bit of money for the filmmaker, and we were going to have one fellow. And we were pretty disappointed in the number of applications that we got and kind of the quality of the applications. And eventually we found someone that eventually resulted in the film American Arab. But when we could never raise the money to keep, you know, the foundation said it was too much money for one person, and we couldn't keep doing that. And so when we reconfigured it as Diverse Voices in Docs, and we moved it to the South Side into Margaret's space, we got all kinds of applications. And to me, the lesson was location matters. You know, when we were doing it out of Quinn on the North Side, at least in Chicago, it seems that location matters. When we moved it to the South Side, all of a sudden, it was like all of these filmmakers were applying and trying to get into the program.
And not just location, but community, matter. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Margaret, did you have something to add?
Yes, I wanted to say this. The other thing is that for the first iteration of our program, there were a lot of people who didn't feel secure about their ability to pull off a documentary of this type. So one of the things when we couldn't get funded, I said, well, we can do this ourselves, because what the project allowed us to find out is that filmmakers needed to have, they didn't know how to do their log lines. They didn't know anything about distribution. And so there was a lot of information, because the cartoon one had to do a lot of extra work to help the filmmaker. And so we saw a situation where we have people who have the skills. They were already filmmakers. They had the ability to do the projects, but they needed support. And that's what we offered in the 9-month program that we had with Diverse Voices in Docs, is they needed that support system to be able to navigate the funders, how you write a proposal, what a budget looks like, what does a marketing plan look like, how do you do this, to really look at editing, re-editing their projects, and how to really collaborate and create that kind of situation within Diverse Voices in Docs. And so it was a lot of intense training and background. And in each year, we've learned something new and incorporated it into the program. And we've gotten some better projects. And first of all, we learned a very important thing that I always knew: you can't do it with a large class. So we are down to 8 fellows because it's just impossible to do this kind of intense training, mentoring, and helping people to develop their project with a big group. And this is why it fails on the university level. And we've always known this. We've never had a class over 12 people. It was always small, intense, and limited enrollment, because that works best for this kind of training, because most of the people don't have a lot of money. That's, so they need to have an intense program where they learn everything, so that when they get out, they can, they have all the tools they need. As Jim said, there were only 3 ways to learn something: the right way, the wrong way, and the Jim Taylor way. So, and when you learn that, you learn the right way. And so that when you go out and do your work, you will do it the right way, so it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's an important aspect, and it's an important aspect of all of Margaret's programs. And if you look around Chicago, there's a lot of people of color working in our industry, in our field, working at television stations and for studios and that kind of thing, who came through the community film workshop. That was the first where they got some of that discipline that sets them on the path to becoming a professional.
So Gordon, how can this current shift towards prioritizing voices, Black voices, people of color, be sustained, and not only a reaction to this moment of racial reckoning?
Right. I mean, it's like a lot of the things that we confront in America. I mean, to sustain it and to not have it just, kind of we do better and then we fall off. And I think we really have to take on the systemic change. It's like organizations like ours can play a role and can change, but we also have to understand that we have to change the gatekeepers. We have to change the people who control the power, and have, be able to influence them and bring pressure on them. And sometimes that can, battles we fought in the past. I remember trying to convince people to get involved in some of the struggles. And they were like, what but they're going to be mad at me if we call them out. They're not going to fund my next project. And I mean, the truth is, I don't believe that. I believe that, in fact, when you wage these battles, if your vision is long enough, you're always going to win one way or another. I don't feel that we've ever, lost a grant or something because we were confrontational with someone. So I think we really got to keep our eye on the big resources. And that's why I always try to bring things back to this idea that what we do, what the documentary and media film world does, and that's why it's so critical that for our democracy, that it represent the people who are actually in our democracy, in our country, that we have a role to play, a critical role to play. And so that's why those resources need to come into our world. But there are going to be some battles in the future that need to be waged.
Mm-hmm. Margaret, Gordon mentioned changing who the gatekeepers are the big institutions, the Sundances and, stuff like that. Are they seeking out people like you to really run these institutions, consult on these institutions? Like what's happening?
I don't play in the big leagues. I'm a small organization. Okay, so I have graduates who have taken their films to Sundance and to all of those institutions, but I really have no real relationship with them because I had my role then was to be there to help build a community and to support the individual filmmakers. Now, as we expand our role, if we do, then that will position me in a place where I can be an advocate in the broader sense of the word. But that's only if that becomes something that the board approves that we should be doing. You can't, see, this is the one thing we can't put on any one institution is to do everything. We just can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just impossible. You can't train and advocate and mentor and provide access and do all this stuff and then fight those battles. That's somebody else's job, to be honest with you. That's another institution. And I don't see myself doing that, but I do see myself becoming more involved and maybe participating more on panels. I just have never, I stopped being on panels a long time ago because, I was the only full-time employee. So I didn't have time to look at 30 or 40 grants and do all of that stuff. So maybe now that I will be able to hire some people that I will have more time to engage again in that activity because being able to review applications is very important in terms of who gets funded. And so when you go with a different perspective on the filmmaker and the community and the topic, then you can have some impact on if that person is funded. That's where I see my role probably being more. And then there are other institutions who will be doing this other advocacy towards the gatekeepers.
I definitely, I want to add on to that because when we say change the gatekeepers or like diversify, the office spaces and institutions and things like that, from my point of view, sometimes people reach out to me and they say, hey, can you come over in this space? And we're having a conversation about diversity and inclusion. And I'm like, no, because I'm running my own institution and I don't have time to fix whatever y'all got going on over there. I don't have more time to volunteer or any of that. And so I can say that a lot of times when we look to Black people to be included, we're sometimes creating more work for Black people who are already, we already have enough battles to fight. And sometimes we're saying, hey, y'all created this problem, so we need for you to fix it, Yeah.
One of the things that is happening on what Margaret was talking about on the nitty-gritty level, or just what you were talking, where it's like reviewing proposals and things like that. And there will be people who ask you to be part of a panel or something, reviewing things. And now that's all becoming paid work. No one is asking you to do that for nothing anymore, which is the way it used to be. And so I think little by little, we're making some progress.
I have been seeing that on the foundational level for sure. And that's a worthy shift. I've been encouraging people when they ask for me to speak or anyone to speak or contribute our time in any way, whether it's a survey or something, just like consider that you're asking me for free labor. And think about the ethics of that, every time. And we need to continue to challenge our institutions to think about all of the ways that the work that we do can be extractive of the community, and think about ways that we can turn that around and make sure that we're always being reciprocal in our actions. Last question, what are your hopes for the industry 15, 20 years from now? I'll start with you, Gordon.
I mean, my hope is that there's going to be a new group of, multicultural, diverse filmmakers who are still waging these battles in our democracy, because I don't think they're going to go away. It's a dialectical relationship. You're always going to have to struggle around all of the issues we've just been talking about, from resources and power to having an impact and having media actually play that role. I think I suspect in 15 to 20 years, we're still going to be having those battles about, is media just something in the marketplace to be sold like, like sausage in a shop, or is it something else that needs to be funded in a way that acknowledges the fact that it is a critical piece of the democratic process? I think, some progress has been made in some areas, and in some areas, I think we're going backwards, to be honest, in terms of understanding the importance of, of media, documentary film, storytelling, as something that is so critical to our society. I remember when you first told me about the TRiiBE, and you had this very entrepreneurial approach to what you were going to do. And I was a little taken aback, it was like, and it's been really exciting to see you guys succeed with that, make it work on that level. And now you're getting some of that other funding that also is acknowledging how important what you're doing is in terms of the larger democratic process.
Would you repeat the question so I can stay on focus?
Sure. I'm asking, what are your hopes for the industry of 15, 20 years from now?
Well, the Community Film Workshop was organized in 1971. And our role, we were a job development organization. Our job focus was to get, in quotes, minorities into the film industry. And we did that. And here we are, 2021. And now we're looking at developing training programs for the same group of people, which means that on a lot of these sets, nothing has changed. So I have to agree with Gordon that the problem is long-term. I'm a child of the 60s. So we never thought that we would still be fighting these same civil rights issues today. So this is why it's so important for us to stay on the case, for new documentaries to come out to correct all of this misinformation. And it's important that we support the filmmakers to our ability, to whatever the extent of our ability to do that, and to not stretch ourselves beyond our limit where we are not effective. We have to decide where we're going to fight, what battles we have to pick. That's basically what we have to decide.
Yeah.
And the filmmaker has to make that decision also, so that you can be effective. And so 10 to 15 years from now, I hope that diverse voices in docs and the Production Institute filmmakers and all of the filmmakers we're going to make in all of our programs, the collectives that we're going to organize, these filmmakers will take it to another level. They will be there. They will take over our role. and develop a new group of documentary filmmakers and develop new platforms, and look at just not the local and national platform, but to look internationally at the issues that we're dealing with, and to take your media international, because it's something about when you do that, then America wakes up and says, oh, so we have to not get bogged down in who we take our media to. So that's my hope, that we have a generation that we're working with now who are still doing work, valid, good work, and who are helping to build future filmmakers.
Thank you so much. That's a great note to end on. Again, I'm Morgan Elise Johnson, and we just had a conversation with Gordon Quinn and Margaret Cables. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.